who exemplify the highest ideals of the Navy League through their significant contributions to world peace, national security, and outstanding service to their country and fellow citizens. In tribute to one who has followed such a course of leadership, the Navy League of the United States is honored to present this award to the country of Norway. Rear Admiral Sonnes reflects excellent credit upon himself and is in keeping with the highest traditions of the naval service of both our nations and the Navy League of the United States. Presented this 4th day of April 2022, signed Dave Riley, 51st National President, Navy League of the United States.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be recognized by the Navy Legion. Thank you, the National President, David Reilly, and the CEO, Mike Stevens, for this honor you've given me. I have to reflect that I was, in 2014, my first panel was in exactly the same situation as we are today, and I was introduced to the family of the Navy League. Where you have citizens providing support to all the sea services, not only in the United States, but also building partnership globally. And that is the friendship you can see in this room today, also represented by other chiefs of Navy. So I recognize the work you do. Thank you for building that partnership. It leads to friendship that is everlasting and globally because we share our values. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now please welcome to the stage our moderator, Rear Admiral Anthony Rossi, Director, Naval International Programs, Office of the Secretary of the Navy.
All right, audible. I was expecting my panelists to come up with me, so I'll introduce them first. So Admiral Gabriel Alfonso Perez Garces, the commander of the Colombian Navy. Rear Admiral Eric Verheg, Commander Regional Maintenance Center and NAVSEA Director for Surface Ship Maintenance and Modernization. And Jed Royal, the Deputy Director for the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. So that's proof that a good plan never survives contact with the enemy. But hopefully that was our one glitch, kind of like Apollo 13, and we're all good from here. Good morning, everybody. Nope, there's a second glitch. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Sea Air Space 2022 Global Leadership Panel. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to host this event. Appreciate Navy League setting it up. And this is obviously an important topic, but I do know the precarious situation of being the last thing between all of you and the reception that's just that one emergency exit away from you. So before I dive in, let me give a little bit of context to the theme this year. I was looking for a topic that would be pertinent to both domestic and international, and I couldn't find one better than the constant decision that we have to go through of balancing fleet capacity building, fleet modernization, and fleet sustainment. Each of those brings its own requirements, its own challenges, its own fiscal constraints, its own industrial capacity constraints, and every nation struggles to find that right balance. So I look forward to hearing our panelists' thoughts on it. As we all know, the security environment has changed quite dramatically recently. We seem to wander fluidly between a Cold War, conflict in the gray zone, and a new great power competition. We've moved from a single main competitor to multiple competitors. At the same time, we also have smaller asymmetrical competitors that seem to pop up constantly. There's the ever-present international terrorism and crime, and then the constant challenges to the rule-based order. Each of these brings its own unique and often competing requirements. Our collective edge is still available, but it's narrowing day by day. It's critical that in today's changing environment, we come together domestically with our Tri-Service Maritime Union of the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard family, with our joint partners, with our international allies and partners, and with our industry partners domestically and internationally to maximize our effectiveness. Together, we can expand and strengthen our capabilities across all domains, from seabed to space, through the littorals, blue water, riverine, and even over land, in the information environment, the cyber environment, and the electromagnetic spectrum. We truly are better together. As we continue to integrate more of our systems, we can see the state of interoperability between us and our partners improving, but there's always challenges. Every year we hold cooperative exercises and execute cooperative deployments to test and prove our interoperability. For example, last year, the United States Marine Corps conducted the first ever cross-deck operation of an F-35B from the United Kingdom Carrier Strike Group. In March of 2020, we completed F-18EF cross-decking between the Eisenhower and the Charles de Gaulle. Over the past year, we've conducted multiple cooperative deployments and bi- and trilateral carrier operations, always testing our interoperability, as well as providing some excellent photo opportunities. These exercises and collaborations are critical in enabling security cooperation, but of course there's always challenges. Threats continue to evolve. We face increasing hurdles in trying to tie together distributed sensors with distributed effectors. New capabilities drive new interoperability requirements and challenges, and to be successful, we need to connect across various national, joint, coalition, at the network architecture, and even the data standard level seamlessly. Even if our allies have the exact same systems as we do, often there's technical impediments to overcome, such as training, ConOps, tactics, and logistics, in order to make sure we have a truly viable and sustainable capability. In order to balance fleet modernization and interoperability, it's imperative that we increase coordination across the naval service investments and innovation efforts. In return, we can reinvest in our readiness and in our highest priority programs, including next generation technologies to combine with existing platforms for a more modern, capable, and ready fleet. No one Navy or nation can succeed alone in this environment, and history has taught us that when charged with a common purpose, with the right mindset, we can come together and do just about anything, even when it seems unattainable. Our partnerships truly are our strategic advantage. In this context, I'm excited to hear what our panelists have to say on balancing fleet capacity, fleet modernization, and fleet sustainment. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Commander of the Colombian Navy, Admiral Perez. Aside from his professional credentials, Admiral Perez's background strikes a personal chord with me. He graduated from the Colombian Naval Academy as a naval engineer who specialized in electronics. He then went on to become the director of the Naval Academy. Admiral Perez was appointed the commander of the Colombian Navy in August 2020. It was under his leadership that for the first time the United States Navy nuclear submarine participated with the Colombian Navy in a highly successful training exercise earlier this year. It's exciting to see and hear our Navy strengthen and increasing our interoperability with one another. The Colombian Navy's been a long-standing partner of the U.S., and we envision it to be that way for years and years to come. Admiral, thank you for coming. We look forward to your remarks. Over to you, sir.
1, 2, see? Hear me? That's great. Okay, thank you very much, Tommy. For me, it's a pleasure to be here in this chair. Try to express in my bad English, but gonna try to do the best. A real Admiral Eric van Verheg. It's a pleasure, Mr. Jed Royal. It's a pleasure. It is special greetings to all attendants today. It is my honor, like a commander of the Colombian Navy, to be standing up in front of you in this event, Sea and Airspace 2022 scenario. And thank you very much for Navy League also to invite me. We are called today by the opportunity to generate a space to share with all of the leaders of the service at sea the strategic vision of the Colombian Navy, trying to answer the question how to balance the development of capabilities, the modernization of the fleet, and sustainment. First, it is necessary to ask ourselves, what Navy does our nation need? Even more, what are the challenges that we must face? In the Colombian case, the threats that the Navy must combat are not on a spectrum between security and defense, like you can see in the slide, like the other navies in the world. We consider international threats, such as organized armed and criminal groups, and external threats against the territorial integrity, maritime border dispute, the influence of extra-hemisphere power, context of instability in neighboring countries, which is nothing more than the respect for a rules basis on international order. New threats, such as natural disaster, damage to the environment, etc. Other threats, such as associated with crime and cyberspace, pandemic, erosion of the social cohesion, weapons of mass destructions, transnational crimes, illegal fishing, irregular migration, for example, and the invisible lines of convergence and transnational organized crime associated with the drugs trafficking as the main fuel for illicit economies, illicit crops, illegal mining, etc., that generate a hybrid scenario or gray areas, amongst many other threats typified in the defense and security policy. In this sense, the existing relationship between sustainability, planning, and defense economy with the limited budget framework are the challenge which find a solution in innovation and cooperation, generating differential capabilities of the naval power to operate in all domains. The next slide, please. For example, the systemic approach, the systemic approach, the model generates approximation to deal with interactively complex systems. Evidence in the successful case of the Orion naval campaign, the result obtained demonstrated this. In 2018, we went from 8 to 40 countries into 2021. With an affectation of more than $18,000 million in that campaign. We understood that the drug trafficking by sea is only one node of a highly complex adaptive system, which mutates and it adapts quickly through links with the other nodes of transnational organized crime, such as human trafficking, terrorism, damage to the environment, etc. In turn, it's linked with other trends that, in short, cause regional instability. With this same approach, the Colombian Navy faced the nodes associated with transnational crimes to protect biodiversity and both natural and cultural resources as strategic assets of the national and national interest through the execution of the naval Artemis campaign through two complementary axes, which seek both to increase the capacity of the state to ensure sovereignty and to generate knowledge of our maritime interest for their protections. Real protections translate into operations to counter criminal structures and illicit economies that threaten its integrity, such as illegal fishing. The model can be led by the other countries, for example. I think, Tony, is the first part of our presentation. I don't know if you have other questions in this moment.
I was thinking, sir, I would go to the others and come back to questions at the end.
Perfect.
Okay. So thank you.
Bien. The next slide, please. The Colombian Navy, next one. The Colombian is not a stranger to the budgetary restrictions that have affected the entire region in the recent years. However, this has not been an obstacle to our force achieving the updates and modernization in accordance with its operational needs and the threats and challenge it faces daily. Through careful institutional planning, capturing the Naval Development Plan 2042, the Navy has a set of possible future scenarios it can use to anticipate future changes in the operational environment. This scenario demands constant updating and improvement of crew training, as well as technological upgrades of our equipment and systems. Our research groups have developed technologies focused on strengthening the existing operational capabilities of the Navy, such as the design and construction of the river support patrol boats in a heavy and light variant, patrol boats and river boats, coastal patrol boats, amphibious landing ships, and ocean patrol vessel, amongst the other units. The foregoing is embodied in the Fleet Construction and Optimization Plan, PROXION, which constitute a prolonged effort over time, which is nurtured by the work and experience of the Strategic Surface Platform Program, PES. These technological developments have been accomplished thanks to existing synergy between the Colombian Navy and the Science and Technology Corporation for the development of maritime and riverine industry, Cotecmar, our shipyard, which is recognized by the Colombian Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation as one of the 12 technological development centers and a member of the National Science, Technology, and Innovation System. This vision of shipbuilding is based on the capabilities of the national shipbuilding industry and the country's defense industrial base, constituting the plan that promotes, through government investment, vectors such as industrial, technological, and academic development, consolidating itself as a country program. The defense sector, the next please. The defense sector participates in policies and strategic direction to comply with the state and government policies, directing jointly all the enforcement and administrative activity of the national order of strategic scope. In this sense, the design of the force structure is based on the identification of objective capabilities, the determination of risk scenarios, the planning and budget programming of resources for the operational and investment of the defense sector in the short and medium and long term, which occur in Colombia, obvious, a capacity-based and planning methodology called capacitas. This model has 5 processes. The first, identify the challenge, risk, and threats, determining priorities and strategic objectives through the political direction. A second instance, and based on the strategic political prioritization, the taxonomy of capacities is proposed, considering the doctrine, organization, material, human resources, and the necessary infrastructure, thus projecting a force structure, a spending structure, and the associated capacity gaps in the medium and long terms. The foregoings give way to the third process that begins by generating a supremely important input for the basis of the National Development Plan, PND, from which the Defense Security Policy, PDS, is structured, and from which the strategic plan of the public forces, specifically for the Colombian Navy, the Naval Development Plan 2042, was structured. This adoption of strategic plans generate a budget programming for the allocation of resources by funding sources. Lastly, the execution of the resources is monitored and controlled. Finally, we understand that the current strategic direction defines the future of our Navy in a coming decades. John.
Thank you, sir. Our next panelist is Rear Admiral Eric Verheg. He's the Commander Regional Maintenance Center, where he oversees the execution of surface ship maintenance and modernization. This includes multiple centers located in the U.S. and also internationally that are responsible for coordinating the depot and intermediate level maintenance of Navy surface fleet. He's also NAVSEA, Director of Surface Ship Maintenance and Modernization, known as C21. This organization is dedicated to life cycle management of the Navy's in-service surface ships. It is responsible for managing modernization, maintenance, training, and activation of programs. Eric, thanks for coming. He was also the first class responsible for teaching me to march, which didn't go very well when I was a plebe at the United States Naval Academy, but it seemed to have worked out okay. So, Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Tony. And to my esteemed fellow panel members, Admiral Perez, Mr. Royal, And to all of you, good afternoon. I appreciate the chance to talk with you about capacity building and fleet modernization and sustainment. I don't think I could think of a more important topic. There is a great tension between those terms, and we wrestle with it every day. Our navies are in huge demand around the world, and again, with very pressing national needs and often competing. I want to add my voice to the Navy League and my appreciation to the Navy League for hosting this forum. I think this is maybe the 57th time they put on this forum, and just the opportunity to connect and the exhibits and meet old shipmates. And even Admiral Perez and I were comparing notes, and I think this is a typical Navy story. Together at different times supporting the same mission. He was in one location and I was in another, and we were supporting the same operations at sea. And then had a chance to connect with my Romanian counterpart, and we talked for 5 or 10 minutes about the Aegis Ashore program there, each of us supporting in different ways. So there are so many connections between us. I think those of us who wear a naval officer's uniform or have worn a naval officer's uniform, we're internationalists at heart. I think that those of us that go to sea are natural collaborators, we're cross-pollinators, and we believe in alliances and partnerships and the old adage that we're better together. Concepts like interoperability and interchangeability and the value of Navy-to-Navy collaboration, these things are in our DNA as maritime services. And to a degree, I think it comes from the fact that our oceans are vast and in many cases ungoverned, and we know that we're better together. CNO Mike Mullen, when he was our CNO, talked about a global 1,000 ship Navy of like-minded navies and nations, and it's a little dated, but it resonated with me then as it does today. And things like port visits and PASEXs and exercises and coalition and joint operations and the uses of each other's training and technical testing ranges. Maritime collaboration takes many, many forms. And I've had a number of assignments, as many of you had, with significant international focus as an exercise officer in the Middle East, the NATO Sea Sparrow Project Office, the Maritime Theater Missile Defense Forum, and I love that assignment, Strike Fleet, Atlantic, and Second Fleet, Aegis Ashore, and my current assignment where I have responsibilities for PMS 326, and I saw Captain Scaron out in the audience today. The common theme and the central focus for each of those tours was capacity building, and it was enabled by shared values and the mindset that we're better together. And the capacity building in these assignments was very often focused in areas like interoperability and C4I, about improving our operational capabilities, presence operations, warfighting skills, et cetera. And very often our collaboration efforts were focused on operations and weapon systems and combat systems, et cetera. In my current job, I'm focused very much, along with my leadership team, on maintenance, modernization, and sustainment topics. And as the Admiral Rossi mentioned, responsibilities that span the globe, and so I frequently get calls around the clock. I've challenged my team to kind of bring the same spirit of international collaboration to the world of maintenance, modernization, and sustainment. I think we have as much to offer each other in this area, in the world of maintenance and modernization, as we do in the others. In areas like designing for ease and speed of maintenance, supply chain resilience, use of sensors and data analytics to inform our operational level, our intermediate level, and our depot level maintenance. Use of technology to reduce cost, to drive down cost, contracting strategies, and supporting each other's voyage, and if needed, battle damage repair. I could go on. For sure, we're better together in this domain, in this area, as we are in other endeavors. So I think we have a very strong and rich history of collaboration focused on capacity building in the world of operations, given all that's on our respective plates, given so many competing demands. I see a need that would greatly benefit all of us, really, in increasing our partnership in the areas of maintenance, mod, and sustainment as well. I'll stop here and look forward to our panel Q&A.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Our third panelist is Jed Royal. He's the Deputy Director of the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. Jed brings a great insight into this panel as he served as the Director of Defense Policy and Plans at the U.S. mission to NATO, representing the U.S. on defense policy, capability, planning, deterrence, and partnership matters. As the Deputy Director at DSCA, he oversees security cooperation programs and efforts to advance U.S. defense and foreign policy interests by building the capacity of foreign partners in order to encourage and enable our allies and partners to respond to our shared challenges. I had the pleasure of being on a panel before with Jed, so I look forward to his comments. They're always really insightful. Jed?
Great. Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you all for being here today. Let me just commend the Navy League for bringing us together this afternoon, throughout the day, throughout this week. It's important to gather. It's important to gather at moments where we see international stress and international points where our adversaries would like to see us not gather, or would like to see us be confused, or would like to see us be opposed to each other on an issue, on a policy, on an operation. And in fact, I think that when we look around the audience today and we spend time with each other throughout the week, we see that in fact the opposite is happening, and I'm grateful to be a part of that, particularly with a very distinguished panel that I have the pleasure of sharing the stage with today. I've been listening to some of what the Navy has been talking about this morning, and our other maritime services. I'm very impressed. As a career civilian, I have never been directly involved in fleet management, but I have very much spent my entire career thinking about relationship management and alliance management and partnership management. And so today, with our topic being on capacity, modernization, and sustainment, I'll try to lift that up just a little bit to think not just about fleets, but also certainly about the nature of our global relationships, the alliances and partnerships that we're able to maintain. Particularly, as Admiral Gilday mentioned this morning, during this decade of concern, as he put it, a decade in which I do think there are certain stresses on the international system we're seeing play out right now. We're seeing advanced by those who are opportunistic and somewhat adventuristic. It will be allies and partnerships that are able to withstand that pressure over time, and it requires daily maintenance of those relationships to make sure that they do sustain the pressures that are coming our way. My agency, the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, was able to celebrate our 50th anniversary last year. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to have the birthday party we really wanted. We'll try that again later this year. But it's 50 years of experience of trying to make sure that the United States and our allies and partners have what we need to have at the capacity at which we need to have it, and that we can have the political will with one another to utilize it in the most effective way. Working with NIPO and with the other implementing agencies and services in the United States has been an extraordinary pleasure for me, in particular as we look at this mission set. Our mission is underpinned by the administration's central belief that to effectively address any transnational challenge, from pandemic to climate change, some of the challenges that Admiral Perez mentioned in his presentation, or on the higher order end of competing with Russia or China from a position of strength, we must invest in America's enduring advantages. Chief among them is, of course, our unrivaled network of partnerships and alliances that advance and protect a stable and open international system. That is the goal. It is an unwavering perspective and North Star for the work of my agency. And I would just say that it's important for us to remember there is no substitute for that network. There is no way that we can spend our way into a better place without the network, or no way to build enough capability that substitutes that network. The network is essential. It's foundational. And as I said earlier, requires daily maintenance and daily attention. So what do? We invest in that relationship. We reinvest in that relationship. We consult. We confer every single day. And you'll see with the new National Defense Strategy that is going to be published here very shortly, that in fact the emphasis on alliances and partnerships, on interoperability and interdependence will only be going up during this decade of conflict. I think it's very important to make sure that we don't lose sight of just how formative that is for the work that we're doing. And in the end, we will be successful in our management of this decade, but it will be because we have done it by, with, and through our partners. We're watching the power of this partnership play out right now in Ukraine, in the planning and in the preparation and the incredible amount of assistance that is being provided. The United States has now provided over $2 billion worth of assistance directly to Ukraine just in this administration. But it is, again, amplified by the tremendous work that is being brought to bear from our allies and partners as well. I get to have those conversations daily about pooling the resources and making sure that it goes to greatest effect. We're working with NATO and European partners on a variety of requests as well, internal to the alliance and to European security writ large. A variety of requests that have come in to look for acceleration on delivery of new equipment for our allies and partners and processing priority sales for their militaries. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to think with them through those requirements. While the U.S. government through DSCA and the Security Cooperation Enterprise actively support this, we also recognize that there are areas for improvement, long-term improvement. And so I want to just touch on a few areas of focus today. First is in the capability and capacity development area. I believe we need to start rethinking somewhat the profitability model for U.S. defense exports or broader investment. Exportability has often become a secondary or tertiary thought when it comes to defense exports. But if we believe that the reliance on allies and partners is at this level of emphasis, we need to be thinking about exportability earlier in the research and development phase and rethinking some of the way that we think about profitability as a result of that. Right now, U.S. defense industry often looks toward the U.S. military as a primary customer, as they should, that's natural, but only considers application of exportable variants of systems to our allies and partners farther down the road. I don't believe that will be sustainable going forward because of the importance that allies and partners will be playing to perform discrete roles, missions, and functions for our collective security interests over time. And so we need to be thinking more creatively up front. We also need to then take on the responsibility as U.S. government to do a better job of communicating and anticipating what that might mean from the U.S. perspective to our allies and partners. We often allow for a conversation to come perhaps at a moment where there's a point of demand from an ally or a partner, rather than investing early in that conversation to make sure we can anticipate together what those requirements might be. This also requires that we take on the opportunity to create new anticipatory policies, which will then send the right signals, convey the right signals to industry as well about where smart bets should be made, smart investments made with limited government resources, but also with private resources that we know will pay off over time. So what I'm referring to here is a higher level order conversation, both with allies and partners and with industry, to anticipate the challenges that we'll be facing together and make sure our resources are used most efficiently. We may also need to reconsider the engagement and access model for allies and partners to the US government and to our defense industry. Like I say, don't wait so much for that demand signal, but advance that conversation early and often to make sure that alignment is established even before the dollars are available, much less spent. I spent 4 years, as Admiral mentioned, at NATO. And one of the things I was responsible for was the NATO defense planning process. 30 different allies coming together and defining together the, every single line item requirement for the defense of our alliance. It's an incredible process to witness, and I don't necessarily recommend replicating that in every other relationship. It's quite onerous process. But the principle of it, I think, is very important for us to consider, that we need to be aware of and actually communicate well together about our expectations for our defense requirements. And all of that will, in fact, yield to deterrence as well. So I suggest that we adopt that principle more regularly in every corner of the world. One project I do believe we need to spend more time on is competitive financing. The idea here is that when you look at US capability compared to that of our adversaries, our systems, quite frankly, are better. We just have better equipment across the board. But where we're less competitive is in terms of how we manage our partners' finances with us. And there we are losing some of the opportunity for our collective security interests by not being able to advance better terms and conditions for the purchasing of US equipment. So we need to be rethinking whether or not the current rules and regulations really fit our security interests long term. I'm proud that our agency and work with some of our interagency partners is very much advancing that thought. Let me turn then briefly to modernization. I talked a little bit about capability and capacity, but modernization within this context, I think, is absolutely necessary at this point in time as well. One area in particular of modernization is to think about non-standard activities and non-program of record. The idea is that the United States buys in standard in bulk to service the requirements of the US military. Oftentimes, those systems are heavy, they're significant, they come with long tails and sustainment that may not necessarily be appropriate for all of our allies and partners. We need to be thinking again about how we make sure that our allies and partners gain access to capabilities that might be better suited for their own military requirements. And there, when we have done this in the past, we haven't always allowed the same level of priority for what is coming to the US military and what might be going to our allies and partners. In the future, we need to establish investment opportunities and also rhythms and habits of making sure that the priorities for our allies and partners are on the same par, on the same level as what we're requiring for the United States. Again, if we have an expectation that we will be relying on our partners even more in the future, we have to find a way to prioritize their defense requirements along the way. Having said that, every relationship is unique, and we need to make sure that we are tailoring to the relationships. I get to manage an agency with 1,300 security cooperation professionals, but the entire US security cooperation enterprise is 20,000 people strong. And every single day we are trying to make sure we have the right conversations with our allies and partners that allow them to know their security requirements are being met by the work that we are doing. I've met with dozens and dozens of our international partners over the last 9 months in this current position. Every single conversation could be wrapped up in the words of interdependence and interoperability. There is no lack of appetite to make sure that we are as tied together as closely as possible. But it always comes down to the modernization piece and the delivery piece of systems where we are finding ourselves having a difficult time making sure we're keeping up with what the international security environment demands of us together. One other area that I would highlight that we need to be looking more at is rapid test and evaluation for new and novel technologies. Often we're finding that small and medium-sized industry partners are coming up with some very interesting ideas. We just haven't had quite enough access to the test and evaluation we need to be able to have to bring those technologies to market quicker and ensure that they are distributed in the right way. This brings me to talk just briefly on emerging and disruptive technologies. In DoD, we've established a Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer focused on scaling data, analytics, and artificial intelligence to enable faster and better decision-making from campaign to conflict. I think it's important that we think about the great deal of investment the United States is putting into these areas with respect to pace of our allies and partners. If we accelerate on the US system and then find, as we look around, we don't have allies and partners to meet that pace with us, we'll be standing alone. And that's an uncomfortable position. It's not a place where we want to be. So we've got to be able to come and bring our allies and partners alongside us and to make sure that they also have access where appropriate to some of the investments that we're making. At NATO, when I was there as well, we had the pleasure of working on a brand new architecture for emerging and disruptive technologies. Again, very much with the focus that as an alliance, we have to keep pace with one another. And interestingly, we found that quite a lot of the most interesting and innovative technologies were not happening in the United States. They were happening in other parts of the alliance. and we wanted very much to take advantage of that as well. Let me turn just briefly to sustainment, and then I'll wrap up. Sustainment of relationships in many ways is, I think, like sustaining a seagoing vessel, in that you can't ignore it when you see alarm bells going off. It's really important to pay attention when you have a leak. And so our partners, I'm proud to say, bring to us their concerns every single day. They do it in the kind of direct candor, with the kind of direct candor that is appropriate for a high order and highly trusting relationships. So this is also a key component. And when you acquire equipment from the United States, it's always important to emphasize that you're not just buying a piece of kit, you're buying a relationship. And it's very important to us that you have access to a total package approach in that, whether it's doctrine or training, education, employment concepts. We want to make sure that we're servicing all elements of a piece of capability that you may be interested in. At the Defense Security Cooperation University, which is one of the subcomponents of my agency, we have a very ambitious plan for how to advance that university, advance its outreach to international partners as well. In fact, we have two elements under the university, one, the Institute for Security Governance, and another, the Defense Institute for International Legal Studies, that are constantly on the road and making sure that the requirements, sustainment requirements of our allies and partners are met, that we're talking about international humanitarian law, we're talking about human rights concerns as well, and building all of that knowledge into the interoperability that we want to be able to have long term. So finally, I'll just wrap up by saying that the future is very much one of the allies and partners. A decade of concern will only be met and matched by this network through capability development, modernization, and sustainment of these relationships. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jed. So we have a few minutes left on the panel, so I'd like to go through the moderated Q&A portion. Admiral Perez, how does the Colombian Navy deal with challenges in the security and defense spectrum?
And the defense and security spectrum, let me answer in Spanish, because the Navy case is very different in the region. I'm going to use my translator to answer, to be more deeper. La realidad de la Marina de Colombia es muy diferente a lo que el común de los países tienen en su marina.
The reality of the Colombian Navy is quite different from the reality of most navies in most countries.
Justamente por lo que acabas de mencionar, se mueve en el espacio entre la seguridad y la defensa nacional.
Precisely because of what you just mentioned, and it is that it has to move across a full spectrum between security and defense.
Además de eso, tiene tres componentes que no los tiene normalmente una marina de aguas azules. Tiene la flota naval.
In addition to that, it has three components that a normal blue sea navy doesn't necessarily comprise. It has the naval fleet,
El cuerpo de guardacostas y los marinos, la infantería de marina.
the coast guards, and the marine infantry.
Okay. Esa diferencia hace que nosotros atendamos no solamente los casos que una marina común tiene que atender en el marco de la defensa nacional en sus espacios marítimos.
That difference makes it so that we not only have to deal with regular cases that any normal Navy would need to deal with in the area of operations of its Blue Sea,
sino que también atendemos casos policivos en nuestro mar territorial con el cuerpo de guardacostas.
but we also deal with law enforcement cases in within our territorial sea with our Coast Guard.
Y con nuestro cuerpo de infantería de marina atendemos temas de seguridad al interior del país en los espacios fluviales o ribereños.
And with our Marine infantry component, we also deal with law enforcement or public security considerations and cases in our riverine areas.
Entonces, el reto para poder construir capacidades, para modernizar la flota y al tiempo sostenerla, es muy complejo porque tenemos que mirar esos tres espectros.
So the challenge for us in order to modernize our capabilities is all the more complex because we have to look at the three different components.
Sí. Nos tenemos que apoyar también en la Dirección General Marítima, DIMAR,
We also have to base ourselves or support ourselves on the General Maritime Directorate,
en la Comisión Colombiana del Océano
on the Colombian Commission on the Ocean,
y también en nuestro astillero Cotecmar,
and also in our shipyard, Cotecmar,
para ser sumamente ingeniosos, con muchísima iniciativa,
in order to be very ingenious, very creative, with a lot of initiative,
para atender los retos en cuanto a recursos, financiamiento y sostenimiento con el presupuesto que tenemos.
in order to be able to address the challenges that we face in terms of budget and financing and the allocation of resources from our national budget.
That's it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
No.
Eric, can you talk about relationships that exist or that you're working on to repair U.S. ships in international ports?
Yes.
I was hoping so.
I did have the pleasure of my director of transformation and my command master chief and a number of others went to Japan recently and also to Australia. And the intersection between those two countries is a Japanese ship, an Australian ship recently completed some voyage repairs at a US facility supported by a Japanese national workforce. So it was really all three countries coming together to effect voyage repairs on a single ship that was operating in the South China Sea in support of common interest, right? So you can imagine many other examples like that. I came away from any Australians in the audience by any chance? All right, good. I came away super impressed with their ambition, their investment, and where they're going. To include expanding their own industrial capacity in a very significant way. And they're investing in dry docks and all sorts of things. And one of the areas we talked about is to make sure that their dry docks and our dry docks are compatible and with the same standards. And so that if one of us needs the assistance of the other in a time of need, that those relationships would be formed and the capabilities understood, and we would be ready to support if needed. So there are many other areas, the use of technology, the modernization strategies. I spoke earlier in my remarks about some of the things that I'd like us to go after together, and I think that's where we're headed. So that was just one example. You can see the same kind of discussions happening in Europe and elsewhere. We need to train and practice in peacetime in our maintenance and modernization world, just like we practice with other missions. Over.
Thanks, Eric. Jed, one for you. So given the current international crises, how's DSCA working to balance, meeting the demands of that while, not impacting partner requirements, refilling domestic stocks, and continuing our development strategies?
I was hoping you would ask that question.
I was hoping you'd answer it, so that's fantastic.
I think this is the challenge, isn't it? And we often think about this in terms of balance, if just a little bit more for U.S. services and then maybe a little bit more for allies and partners. I'm not sure that balance is really the right word here, but it does challenge our thinking to try and determine just exactly where we do make those investments, how we open the aperture to industry and ensure that everybody who might need it can find that there is reliability in U.S. defense industry and the global partnerships that our industry has. A few just quick framing thoughts. One is that I think we're finding in the current situation the role of security cooperation as a crisis management tool is a little bit new for us. And so we need to be thinking about how the security cooperation community starts to think about its role in crisis management and making a better evaluation of the requirements globally. Because right now we're seeing stresses in Europe, in the Middle East, in the Indo-Pacific, and certainly a great deal of stresses in Latin America and Africa as well. The world is not becoming less complex. And so we do have to make sure that we're thinking about our role as crisis managers in the current framework. There's certainly value in a broad network. And here, perhaps the most traditional supply chains and supply management processes won't necessarily be the best way to service in the future. So we need to think broadly about where our reliance lies, but also think about key redundancies where that might be necessary for resilience going forward. I'd also suggest that industry creativity and an attention to these global requirements also come to the fore. And I would just pause to say thank you to all of those industry partners who have been so effective in helping us manage the support to Ukraine over the last few months. It's been extraordinary to see some of our partners step up. We're going to need more of that. And I believe that this is quite likely the type of conflict that we'll be seeing in the coming years, flashpoints that pop up like this, where we will need to be able, as a global community, come and support those who are in the fight. Having said all of that, COVID and the crisis dynamic has shown us that, in fact, there is deep fragility within some of the supply chains and the industrial depth that we hoped wasn't there. We're going to need to address that. We need to address that first and foremost with respect to critical munitions and other critical pathways to system management. That is both for the US and for our allies and partners. I mentioned non-program of record previously, thinking about non-standard items. It sometimes can be brought to market faster and more effectively than some of the heavier systems that the United States purchases for itself. I think we need to be thinking very much about that. I wonder out loud here with you whether or not the authorities and the resources are in fact sufficient to service the security cooperation demands that we're seeing emerge at this point in time. So another conversation within the U.S. interagency, within the U.S. government, including with Congress, is warranted for sure along those lines. And then we need to make sure that we're looking to the future as well and thinking very much about Taiwan and other partners that will be put under strain purposefully and make sure that our thinking extends not to the current moment, but well into the future as well. And then finally, just to end on the value of strategic alignment. We need to be able to see the world together. That doesn't mean we don't have hard conversations where disagreement might happen, but let's work through that with our allies and partners and try to find complementary approaches and complementary perspectives on where we might be headed so that we can spend every nickel together in the most efficient and effective way. Thank you.
Thanks, Jed. So I think we have time for one more. So Admiral Perez, I'll give you the final question. So you talked a little about the Capacitas model. How is that used to assign resources to the Colombian Navy?
Ok. El modelo Capacitas lo que busca es analizar el desarrollo de una capacidad, pero garantizando su sostenibilidad y su vida útil en cuanto a recursos en el futuro.
What the Capacitas model does is to look at the development of a capability throughout in the long term, but also in terms of its resources required for it and its sustainment.
Eso quiere decir que no es un planeamiento vertical en un solo momento en tiempo,
So it's
sino
not a
es-
vertical planning at one point in time,
sino es un planeamiento horizontal con una vida, analizando la vida útil del medio.
but it's rather a horizontal planning, taking a look at the useful life of the element.
Es una parte.
That's one part of it.
La otra parte es las fuentes de recursos económicos
The other part of it is that the sources of financing
no los encontramos solamente en el presupuesto normal del Ministerio de Defensa.
are not only found in the normal Ministry of Defense budget.
Nosotros buscamos fuentes de recursos en otros sectores del gobierno nacional.
We also find sources of financing in other government sectors.
Por ejemplo, tenemos créditos offset que son producidos a partir de contratos de desarrollo de capacidades.
For instance, we have offset credits that are produced by virtue of contracts for the development of capacities.
Tenemos fondos del Ministerio del Interior,
We also have funds from the Ministry of Interior.
tenemos fondos de las entidades locales y regionales de gobierno en Colombia,
And also funds from provincial, regional, or local authorities and agencies in Colombia.
tenemos también recursos a través de convenios con diferentes empresas nacionales.
And we also have funds via resources with different private sector companies in Colombia.
Y finalmente también tenemos convenios de cooperación internacional.
And lastly, obviously, we have international cooperation agreements as well.
Este grupo de recursos
This universe of resources
nos permite mantener unas capacidades para enfrentar los retos,
allows us to maintain a certain capabilities to confront our challenges.
pero Tony, el punto más importante en el manejo de pocos recursos en un ambiente tan complejo como el que vivimos hoy
But the most important issue in managing a very limited amount of resources in an environment as complex as the one we face today
es la cooperación internacional y la suma de capacidades
is international cooperation and the pooling of capabilities
para ser definitivamente decisivos y fuertes frente a los retos que se nos avecinan en el entorno mundial.
in order to be able to be decisive and strong in light of the challenges that we are all facing in the current international scene.
Entonces, thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Stronger together. Yes. All right. Well, that is all the time we have today. So first, appreciate the Navy League setting this up for us. If I could have a round of applause for the panelists. And the international reception is right behind that wall. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.